She was a ghost at the grandest ball of the season, a creature of the shadows, defined not by her wit or her heart, but by the smattering of freckles across her nose. They called her blemished, unfortunate, a flaw in the polished perfection of London's high society. For years, Sophia Vance had learned to make herself small, to hide from the cruel whispers and mocking glances. But tonight, the most powerful man in the room, the Duke of Blackwood, was staring, and she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that he was about to ruin her, or save her. The chandeliers of Blackwood Manor dripped with crystal and light, casting a brilliant, unforgiving glow upon the throng of London's elite. For Sophia Vance, it was a particular kind of torture. Each glittering surface seemed to catch her reflection and throw it back at her, a constant reminder of why she felt she did not belong. While other young ladies were adorned with diamonds and pearls, Sophia felt her most prominent accessories were the ones she was born with, the constellation of light brown freckles that dusted her nose and cheeks. "Stand up straighter, Sophia," her mother, Mrs. Vance, hissed from behind her fan. "And for heaven's sake, do try to look pleasant. No man wants a wife who looks as though she's attending a funeral." Sophia forced the corners of her mouth upwards, a gesture that felt as foreign as the stiff whalebone corset digging into her ribs. "I am trying, Mother." "Trying is not enough. You must succeed," Mrs. Vance retorted, her eyes scanning the room with the predatory focus of a hawk searching for a suitable match for her daughter. It was Sophia's third season, and the prospects were looking as dim as a sputtering candle. The Vances were a respectable family, their wealth derived from sound investments in shipping, but they lacked a title. Their only true currency in this cutthroat market was a daughter's beauty and charm, and in her mother's eyes, Sophia was sorely lacking in the former. "Did you apply the extra layer of powder I gave you? I can still see them." Sophia instinctively raised a gloved hand to her cheek. "Yes, Mother. Any more and I shall look like a ghost." "Better a ghost than a speckled hen," her mother muttered, the casual cruelty of the words a familiar ache in Sophia's chest. It was a nickname she had been unable to shake since childhood, first whispered by jealous schoolgirls, and now, it seemed, adopted by the entire ton. The architects of her misery were, as usual, holding court near the grand staircase. Lady Isabel Finch, a diamond of the first water with porcelain skin and hair the colour of spun gold, stood surrounded by a circle of admirers. Her laughter, sharp and melodic, carried across the ballroom. As her cold blue eyes swept the room, they landed on Sophia, and a slow, malicious smile spread across her perfect lips. Sophia's stomach twisted. She tried to turn away, to melt into the damask wallpaper, but it was too late. Isabel, flanked by her two loyal lapdogs, Lady Beatrice and Lady Cressida, began to glide in her direction. "Why, if it isn't Miss Vance," Isabel purred, her voice loud enough for those nearby to turn their attention. "Hiding in the shadows again? One would think you'd prefer the light to show off your unique complexion." Beatrice giggled. Perhaps she fears the light will make her freckles multiply, like sun spots on a piece of fruit left to rot. A wave of heat washed over Sophia's face, a blush so fierce she was sure it made every single freckle stand out in stark relief. She curtsied stiffly, her eyes fixed on the polished marble floor. "Lady Isabel, a pleasure to see you." "Oh, the pleasure is all mine," Isabel said, tapping Sophia's arm with her fan. The gesture was meant to look friendly, but it felt like a brand. "We were just discussing the upcoming country retreat at Lord Ashworth's estate. I imagine you enjoy the country, Miss Vance. So many opportunities to be outdoors, communing with nature, and other spotted things." The circle of listeners tittered. Sophia felt 100 pairs of eyes on her, dissecting her, judging her. Her mother had drifted away, pretending not to know her own daughter in this moment of humiliation. It was a familiar tactic. Sophia was on her own. She swallowed hard, searching for a reply that was dignified but not confrontational, a line she always struggled to walk. But before she could speak, a hush fell over the room. The music seemed to soften, the chatter faded. A footman at the grand entrance announced a name that sent a ripple of excitement through the assembly. His Grace, Alistair Beaumont, the Duke of Blackwood. Sophia risked a glance upwards. The man who entered was the owner of this very house, yet he moved with an air of detachment, as if he were a visitor in his own life. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark, unruly hair that defied the neat styling of the other gentlemen. His eyes, a deep, piercing grey, swept the room with an expression of profound boredom. He was, without question, the most sought-after bachelor in all of England. His title was ancient, his fortune immeasurable, and his refusal to marry had become the stuff of legend. Every unmarried lady in the room, including Isabel, immediately straightened, their smiles brightening, their poses shifting to display their best assets. Isabel cast one last triumphant sneer at Sophia before turning her full attention to the Duke, her ambition practically radiating from her. Sophia used the distraction to make her escape. She slipped through a side door that led to the library, a sanctuary of silence and shadows. The scent of old paper and leather was a balm to her frayed nerves. She ran a hand over the spines of the books, feeling the cool, solid weight of them beneath her fingers. Here, she was not the speckled hen. She was just Sophia. She sank into a worn leather armchair tucked away in a dark corner, finally allowing the tears of frustration that had been burning her eyes to fall. Why did it matter so much? Why couldn't they see past the silly spots on her skin to the person beneath? She was well read. She had a keen mind for numbers, and she possessed a kindness her tormentors couldn't begin to comprehend. Yet none of it mattered. In their world, the surface was everything. A deep voice from the doorway startled her. Hiding from the festivities, or from a particularly dreadful dance partner? Sophia shot to her feet, hastily wiping her cheeks with the back of her glove. Standing there, silhouetted against the bright light of the ballroom, was the Duke of Blackwood himself. The Duke of Blackwood stepped fully into the library, letting the door click softly shut behind him. The sudden quiet amplified the frantic thudding of Sophia's heart. She felt trapped, a mouse cornered by a lion. This was 1,000 times worse than being accosted by Isabel. At least with Isabel, she knew the nature of the attack. With the Duke, she was entirely off balance. His gaze was intense, analytical, and for the first time that evening, it was directed entirely at her. "Your Grace," she stammered, sinking into a deep curtsy that was more a desperate attempt to hide her face than a gesture of respect. "Forgive my intrusion. I was just admiring your collection." Alistair Beaumont moved further into the room, his eyes scanning the shelves before they settled back on her. He had a glass of brandy in his hand, which he swirled gently, the amber liquid catching the low light. "An admirable collection, I'm told. My father was the bibliophile. I merely inherited the property." His voice was a low baritone, smooth and devoid of the artifice she heard in the voices of most noblemen. "I find the contents of the books far more interesting than the bindings." He stopped a few feet from her, close enough that she could smell the faint, clean scent of sandalwood and starch. She kept her gaze lowered, focusing on the intricate pattern of the Persian rug. To look at him directly felt like staring into the sun. "And you?" he prompted. Do you find the contents more interesting than the party? I confess I often do, Your Grace, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. A book will not judge you for a misstep in a quadrille. A corner of his mouth lifted in a ghost of a smile. Nor will it gossip if your dress is last season's colour. A most astute observation, Miss Vance, Your Grace. Sophia Vance. Miss Vance? He said her name slowly, as if testing its weight. Well, you are not the only one seeking refuge. I find my own parties to be a particular form of endurance test. He gestured toward the armchair she had vacated. Please don't let me disturb your peace. I only came in here to escape a legion of mothers who look at me as if I were the last prize bull at market. The unexpected frankness of his comment startled a small laugh out of her. She quickly smothered it, horrified at her own impertinence, but the Duke's faint smile widened. There now, he said. That wasn't so terrible, was it? Feeling a sliver of courage, she risked a quick glance up at his face. His grey eyes were not cold, as she had first thought, but rather watchful and intelligent. They seemed to see more than the surface. A fresh wave of anxiety washed over her. What did he see when he looked at her? The same flaws everyone else did? I should return to the ballroom, she said, her voice tight. My mother will be searching for me. And will you find a dance partner more engaging than this 17th century treatise on celestial mechanics? He asked, nodding toward a heavy tome on a nearby table. Sophia's eyes followed his. I don't know. I was not looking at that one, Your Grace. No? He took a step closer, his gaze still on her. A pity. It's one of my favorites. The author argues that the stars are not perfect, static points of light, but rather dynamic, flawed spheres of fire and gas, each with its own imperfections. He believed it was their imperfections that made them beautiful and unique. The words hung in the air between them. Sophia felt a strange resonance with his statement, a pull towards a meaning she felt but couldn't quite grasp. Was he just making polite conversation, or was there something more behind his words? She was too afraid to hope for the latter. The silence stretched, and her panic returned. She had to leave before she made a complete fool of herself. You are very kind to share your knowledge, Your Grace, she said, her formality a shield. But I must take my leave. She curtsied again and moved towards the door, her entire body rigid with the effort of appearing composed. She could feel his eyes on her back with every step. Miss Vance, he called out, just as her hand touched the cool brass of the doorknob. She paused, her back still to him. Yes, Your Grace. I hope you find a worthy dance partner, he said. His voice was quiet, yet it seemed to fill the vast library. One who appreciates the complexity of the stars. Sophia didn't dare turn around. She simply nodded and slipped out of the room, her heart hammering against her ribs. She didn't know what to make of the encounter. The Duke of Blackwood had not recoiled from her. He had not smirked or looked away. He had spoken to her, really spoken to her, with an intelligence and depth that caught her completely off guard. As she re-entered the cacophony of the ballroom, she saw Isabel holding court, a triumphant glint in her eye as she recounted some witty story. For the first time, the sight didn't fill Sophia with the usual dread. It was still painful, but it was overshadowed by the memory of a quiet room, a deep voice, and a strange conversation about the imperfect beauty of the stars. It was a fleeting, fragile feeling, but it felt a little like hope. The following week, the London season continued its relentless pace of teas, promenades, and evening soirees. Sophia's brief encounter with the Duke of Blackwood felt like a dream, a strange and vivid anomaly in the drab tapestry of her social life. He had not approached her again, and she had certainly not sought him out. She convinced herself that it had meant nothing, that he was simply a bored host making polite conversation with an overlooked guest. Yet the memory of his words lingered, imperfect, yet beautiful. The thought was a small, warm ember in the cold cavern of her insecurity. On a bright Tuesday afternoon, the fashionable world descended upon Hyde Park for the daily promenade. Carriages rolled along the Serpentine, ladies showed off their finest bonnets, and gentlemen on horseback exchanged pleasantries. Sophia walked beside her younger sister, Clara, a vivacious girl of 17, who had not yet had her spirit crushed by the brutal machinery of the marriage market. "You've been quiet all week, Sophia," Clara observed, her own face bright with the simple joy of being out in the sun. "Are you still thinking about that dreadful Isabel Finch?" "I am trying not to," Sophia said, adjusting the brim of her bonnet to cast her face further into shadow. The sun, as much as she loved its warmth, was her enemy, coaxing out new freckles as if planting a garden on her skin. "You should have seen her face when the Duke entered," Clara giggled. She looked like a cat that had not only found the cream, but intended to drown in it. Sophia managed a weak smile. The truth was, she was thinking of the Duke. His unexpected kindness in the library had been a momentary reprieve, but his subsequent silence had only reinforced her belief that she was, and always would be, invisible. As if summoned by their conversation, a stir went through the crowd. Hoofbeats slowed, and conversations paused. The Duke of Blackwood, mounted on a magnificent black stallion, was riding towards them. He was dressed not in formal evening wear, but in impeccably tailored riding clothes that emphasized his athletic build. He looked less like a duke and more like a hero from a romantic novel. He nodded curtly to the various people who greeted him, his expression unreadable, until his eyes found Sophia. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. Instead of riding on, he reined his horse to a stop directly in front of her and Clara. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice carrying easily in the open air. "And Miss—" "Clara Vance, Your Grace," Clara supplied, executing a perfect, enthusiastic curtsy. "It is an honor." "The honor is mine," the Duke replied, his gaze returning to Sophia. "I trust you are enjoying the fine weather." Sophia's heart began its familiar, frantic dance. She could feel the eyes of everyone on the promenade turning towards them. Whispers erupted like the rustling of leaves. Lady Isabel Finch, who had been strolling with a group of friends just a few yards away, stopped dead in her tracks, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. "It is a lovely day, Your Grace," Sophia managed to reply, her voice thin. Before the Duke could respond, Isabel saw her opportunity. With a saccharine smile plastered on her face, she swept over, her parasol held high. "Your Grace," she cooed, positioning herself between the Duke's horse and Sophia. "How wonderful to see you. I was hoping I might have a word. My father, the Earl of Danbury, was just speaking of you." Alistair's expression tightened ever so slightly. "Lady Isabel, your father is well, I trust?" "Very well," Isabel chirped. Then, with a calculated turn, she gestured towards Sophia. "We were just admiring the vibrant effects of the sun. It brings out such a rustic quality in some complexions. Don't you agree, Miss Vance? You must be very careful, or you'll be quite covered in blemishes by summer's end." The insult was as sharp as a shard of glass, and it was delivered in front of the one person whose opinion Sophia suddenly, desperately cared about. The heat rising in her cheeks was no longer just a blush. It was the fire of pure humiliation. She instinctively flinched, her head bowing as she tried to will the ground to swallow her whole. This was her nightmare realized, being publicly shamed for her greatest insecurity by her worst enemy in front of the most powerful man she knew. She avoided his gaze, certain she would see pity, or worse, distaste in his eyes. Clara gasped and took a protective step forward, but the Duke's voice cut through the tense silence, calm and clear. "I believe you are mistaken, Lady Isabel," he said. Isabel's smile faltered. "Your Grace?" Alistair dismounted from his horse in one fluid motion, handing the reins to a nearby groom. He walked to stand directly in front of the mortified Sophia, forcing her to look up. His grey eyes were fixed on her face, but there was no pity in them. There was only an unnerving intensity, a focus so complete it felt as if they were the only two people in the park. He gently, almost reverently, reached out and tipped her chin up with his finger, his touch sending a jolt through her entire body. His gaze swept over the bridge of her nose and her cheeks, the very features she so despised. Sophia held her breath, bracing for the final, killing blow of judgment. Instead, the Duke of Blackwood looked from her face to the stunned Lady Isabel, and then back again. When he spoke, his voice was soft, yet it carried with an authority that commanded the attention of everyone within earshot. "They are not blemishes," he said, his eyes locking with Sophia's. "They are not flaws." He paused, a small, genuine smile gracing his lips for the first time. "They're stars," he said simply, "a constellation scattered by a careless god." The Duke's words echoed in the stunned silence of Hyde Park. A constellation, not a flaw. The world seemed to tilt on its axis for Sophia. She stared up at him, speechless, feeling the warmth of his fingers still lingering on her chin. His grey eyes held hers, and in their depths she saw not a hint of mockery, only a quiet sincerity that stole her breath. Lady Isabel's face, which a moment before had been a mask of triumphant cruelty, had paled to a shade of chalky white. Her mouth opened and closed silently, like a fish gasping for air. To be so publicly and calmly contradicted by the Duke of Blackwood was a social rebuke of the highest order. The whispers that had been about Sophia's freckles now shifted, focusing on Isabel's shocked and furious expression. Without another glance at the fuming Isabel, Alistair offered his arm to Sophia. "Miss Vance, would you do me the honour of walking with me?" It was not a request. It was a declaration. Numbly, Sophia placed her hand on his offered arm. The fabric of his coat was fine wool, solid and warm beneath her trembling fingers. Clara, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and delight, beamed at her sister before tactfully falling into step a respectful distance behind them. As they began to walk, a path seemed to clear before them. The cream of society parted like the Red Sea, their gazes a mixture of envy, curiosity, and disbelief. Sophia felt intensely self-conscious, but the Duke's presence beside her was a fortress. He seemed utterly oblivious to the stir they were causing, his attention focused solely on her. "I apologize if I overstepped, Miss Vance," he said in a low voice meant only for her. "But I have little patience for bullies." "You didn't overstep, Your Grace," she whispered, finding her voice at last. You were very kind." It was not kindness. It was the truth, he stated simply. "I have spent many nights staring at the heavens through a telescope. I know a star when I see one." The revelation that he was an astronomer, the man from the library who spoke of celestial mechanics, clicked into place. It wasn't just a clever line, it was a reflection of who he was. They walked in a comfortable silence for a few minutes, the rhythm of their steps falling into sync. Sophia found herself relaxing for the first time in what felt like years. The Duke did not press her with idle chatter, but seemed content to simply share the quiet moment. The very next day, a footman delivered a small, exquisitely wrapped package to the Vance household. Inside was a book, a brand-new edition of Galileo's Siderius Nuncius, the Starry Messenger. Tucked within the pages was a simple card bearing the Duke of Blackwood's seal. On it, he had written, "So you might see what I see." A.B. From that day forward, the Duke's intentions became unmistakable. He was not merely being kind, he was courting her. He began to call at the Vance residence, not for the brief, formal 15 minutes prescribed by etiquette, but for an hour or more, engaging Sophia in conversations about literature, philosophy, and the cosmos. He ignored Mrs. Vance's flutterings and fawning, his focus always respectfully on Sophia. He invited her and her family to view his private observatory at Blackwood Manor, a magnificent domed room at the highest point of the house. Under the vast, intricate machinery of his brass telescope, he showed her the rings of Saturn and the clustered jewels of the Pleiades. In the dark, with only the starlight to illuminate them, the world of the London Tun and its petty cruelties felt 1,000,000 miles away. Their connection deepened with every meeting. Sophia found that beneath his reserved, ducal exterior, Alistair was a man of profound thought and quiet passion. He was fascinated by her mind, her quick wit, and the insights she offered. In turn, she discovered a strength within herself she never knew she possessed. His admiration was a mirror, reflecting a version of herself she was slowly starting to believe in, a woman of substance and worth. But for every step she took into the light of the Duke's favour, the shadow of Isabel Finch's hatred grew longer and darker. Publicly humiliated and privately seething, Isabel watched their burgeoning romance with a venomous jealousy that consumed her. She had lost the Duke's attention, a prize she considered hers by right of beauty and birth. She would not stand for it. She began her campaign subtly, whispers in powder rooms, veiled comments at tea. Such a strange match, she would muse to her friends. The Duke of Blackwood and that country mouse. One has to wonder what his game is. Perhaps he has a wager with his friends? When the gossip failed to gain traction, her methods grew more vicious. She started to dig into the Vance family's background. Her friend, Lady Beatrice, whose father was a notorious gossip, became her co-conspirator. They put out feelers, questioned servants, and scrutinized the family's history, searching for any crack, any hint of scandal they could exploit. "There must be something," Isabel hissed to Beatrice one afternoon over tea. "No one is that plain and that perfect. The Vances came from nothing 2 generations ago. There is dirt there, I know it, and I will find it. I will prove to the Duke that his precious star is nothing but a lump of common coal." Isabel's obsession was no longer just about winning the Duke. It was about destroying Sophia. She needed to tear down the woman who had, with no apparent effort, claimed the heart of the man Isabel had marked for her own. And she was patient. She knew the perfect scandal, once found, had to be deployed with surgical precision to inflict the maximum possible damage. The autumn air grew crisp, and the London season began its slow wind-down, with the remaining elite planning their retreats to the country. The courtship between the Duke and Sophia had become the undisputed topic of conversation. Alistair was devoted, his attentions so open and sincere that even the most cynical gossips were beginning to see it as a genuine love match. Sophia, blossoming under his affection, walked with a new confidence, her head held high. The freckles were still there, of course, but she no longer saw them as a curse. They were simply a part of her, the woman the Duke of Blackwood loved. Isabel Finch, however, had not been idle. Her relentless digging had finally yielded a weapon. It was small, circumstantial, but in the hands of a skilled manipulator, it was more than enough. The Vances had a distant cousin, a young man named Thomas Galloway. He was the son of Sophia's mother's late sister, a woman who had married poorly and fallen into poverty. Thomas was a talented artist, but had no means of his own. Secretly, and against her mother's wishes, Sophia had been corresponding with him for years, occasionally sending him small sums of money from her own allowance to help him buy supplies. Her father knew and approved, admiring her compassionate heart, but her mother feared any association with their poor relations. Their meetings were always discreet, usually in a quiet bookshop in a less fashionable part of town, so as not to cause any gossip or embarrass her mother. It was this secrecy that Isabel, through a bribed former maid of the Vances, discovered. The twist of the knife was the nature of their correspondence. Sophia, encouraging her cousin's artistic dreams, often wrote with effusive, familial affection. She signed her letters, "With all my love, your devoted Sophia." To an outsider, without context, the letters could easily be misconstrued as romantic. Isabel had her plan. It was diabolical in its simplicity. First, she paid a forger to create a new letter, one that mimicked Sophia's handwriting, but spoke of a secret, passionate love and a clandestine meeting. Then, she arranged for the Duke to be in the right place at the right time. One afternoon, Alistair arrived at the Vance residence to take Sophia for a drive, only to be told by a flustered Mrs. Vance that Sophia had stepped out unexpectedly. As he was leaving, a street boy, paid handsomely by Isabel, ran up to his carriage. "A message for the Duke," the boy cried, handing Alistair a sealed note before disappearing back into the crowd. The note was not from Isabel. It was from a concerned friend, written in an elegant, anonymous hand. "Your Grace," it read, "if you value your honor, you should know that the woman you are courting is not what she seems. She plays you for a fool. If you doubt me, go to Hatchard's bookshop on Piccadilly this very moment. You will see for yourself." Alistair's first instinct was to dismiss it as malicious gossip. But a seed of unease had been planted. Why had Sophia left so suddenly without a word? It was unlike her. Against his better judgment, his concern warring with his trust, he directed his driver to Piccadilly. He arrived and positioned himself across the street, feeling like a common spy. Minutes later, he saw Sophia arrive, looking over her shoulder as if to ensure she wasn't being followed. Her behavior, so furtive and anxious, struck a discordant note. A young man with paint-stained fingers and clothes that were clean but well-worn met her at the door. He was handsome in a rough, artistic way. Sophia smiled at him, a warm, intimate smile that Alistair had come to believe was reserved only for him. She handed the man, Thomas, a small, heavy purse. He took it, and then, in a gesture of profound gratitude, he took both of her hands in his and kissed them. From Alistair's vantage point across the street, the gesture looked deeply personal, deeply affectionate. They spoke for a few more minutes before disappearing inside the bookshop together. The image burned itself into Alistair's mind. The anonymous note, Sophia's secrecy, the handsome young man of a lower station, the purse of money, the intimate gesture, Isabel's earlier whispers about Sophia's family coming from nothing, suddenly echoed in his head. Was it possible? Had he been so blinded by his affection that he had failed to see a deception being played out right in front of him? Doubt, a cold and venomous serpent, coiled in his gut. His trust, which he gave so rarely, felt the first sharp sting of betrayal. He did not go into the bookshop. He did not confront her. Instead, consumed by a storm of confusion and hurt, he simply ordered his driver to take him home. Later that evening, the forged letter arrived at his manor, delivered by another anonymous messenger. He recognized Sophia's handwriting instantly. "My dearest T," it began, "I have secured the funds as promised. The Duke suspects nothing. He is a kind man, but dreadfully naive. Soon we shall have enough, and we can be together, away from all this. Just a little more patience, my love. Meet me at our usual place. With all my love, your devoted Sophia." Reading the words in her familiar script was like a physical blow. The visual proof from the bookshop, combined with this damning letter, shattered his faith. The man who analyzed the stars with cool logic was now lost in a fog of emotion. He felt like a fool. He had championed her, defended her, offered her his heart, and it seemed she had been laughing at him all along, using him for his money. The pain was sharp, and it quickly curdled into a cold, protective anger. Sophia left the bookshop feeling light and happy. Thomas had shown her his latest sketches, and his talent was undeniable. The money she'd given him would allow him to rent a small studio space. Seeing the hope in her cousin's eyes had filled her with a quiet joy. She was so lost in her pleasant thoughts that she didn't notice the chill that had descended upon her world until the next day. She awaited Alistair's customary afternoon visit, but he never came. No note of explanation arrived, no flowers, nothing. A second day passed in silence, then a third. A knot of anxiety began to tighten in her stomach. Had he fallen ill? Had there been an accident? She sent a polite inquiry to Blackwood Manor, only to receive a curt, formal reply from a secretary stating that His Grace was in good health, but was occupied with ducal matters. The cold, impersonal dismissal was a slap in the face. It was then that the whispers reached her. They started at a tea hosted by Lady Danbury, Isabel's mother, and spread through the ton like wildfire. The story was that the Duke had discovered Miss Vance's true nature, that she had a secret lover, a low-born artist she was supporting with money she wheedled from her wealthy admirers. Her meetings with the Duke were a sham, a clever ploy to elevate her status and fund her sordid affair. The forged letter, or at least its contents, was now common knowledge, repeated with relish in every drawing-room in London. Sophia was devastated. The world she had just begun to feel comfortable in crumbled around her. Former acquaintances now looked through her as if she were made of glass. Her mother wept and berated her for bringing such ruin upon their family. "I told you not to associate with those people," she wailed, referring to Thomas. "I told you it would bring us to ruin." But the deepest wound was Alistair's silence. He hadn't confronted her. He hadn't asked for an explanation. He had simply believed the worst and discarded her. The man who had seen stars on her face now saw only deceit. The pain of his mistrust was a physical ache, a weight so heavy she could barely breathe. For a week, she barely left her room, succumbing to a profound despair. She replayed every moment they had spent together, searching for a sign that his feelings had been false, but she could find none. The memory of his sincerity was what made his current silence so unbearable. One rainy afternoon, as she stared out her window at the dreary London street, something inside her shifted. The tears dried up, replaced by a slow-burning anger. She had spent her entire life cowering, hiding from the judgment of others. She had allowed Isabel's taunts to define her. Then she had allowed Alistair's admiration to redefine her. She was tired of being a reflection in someone else's mirror. She was Sophia Vance, and she knew the truth. If no one else would stand up for her, she would have to stand up for herself. Her resolve hardened into steel. She sat at her writing desk, her posture straight and her hand steady. She would not write a letter begging Alistair for an audience or pleading her innocence. He had had his chance to trust her, and he had failed. Instead, she wrote a different kind of letter. It was a letter of farewell, but it was not the letter of a victim. Your Grace, it has come to my attention that my character has been most cruelly and publicly maligned. It has also become painfully clear that you have chosen to give credence to these vicious rumors without affording me the common courtesy of a question. I will not trouble you with the truth. The truth is a quiet thing, and it seems you prefer the loud clamor of gossip. The man I thought I knew was a student of the stars, one who understood that true light often travels a great distance to be seen, and can be easily obscured by clouds of falsehood. I see now that I was mistaken. I will not be a pawn in your society's games any longer. I am returning to my family's home in the country. I prefer the honest soil and the clear night sky to the polluted air of London and its fickle inhabitants. I return to you the book you so kindly gave me. Perhaps its next reader will better appreciate its lessons on looking closer to discern the truth. Sophia Vance. She sealed the letter and packaged it with the copy of Siderius Nuncius. She gave it to her father's most trusted footman, with instructions to deliver it directly into the Duke of Blackwood's hands. As the footman departed, Sophia felt a profound sense of release. She had lost the Duke, she had lost her reputation, but in the wreckage she had found something far more valuable: her own unbreakable self-respect. She would leave London with her head held high, not as a disgraced woman fleeing scandal, but as someone who refused to let lies have the final word. Alistair sat in his library, the same room where he had first truly spoken to Sophia, surrounded by a silence that felt heavy and suffocating. The brandy in his glass offered no comfort. For days he had been wrestling with his own actions. The initial searing anger had cooled, leaving behind a residue of doubt and a hollow ache of regret. He kept seeing her face in his mind, not the furtive woman outside the bookshop, but the intelligent, earnest woman who had debated philosophy with him, the one who had blushed when he'd called her Freckles' stars. Could he have been wrong? Could the evidence that had seemed so damning be nothing more than a carefully constructed lie? His valet, an older man named Miles, who had served the Beaumont family for 40 years, entered the room with a silver tray. "A package for you, Your Grace. Delivered by the Vance's man," Miles said, his tone carefully neutral, though Alistair could detect a hint of disapproval in his eyes. Miles had liked Sophia. Alistair took the package. He recognized the shape of the book instantly. A cold dread washed over him as he broke the seal on the accompanying letter. He read Sophia's words, each one a perfectly aimed dart at his conscience. "The truth is a quiet thing, and it seems you prefer the loud clamor of gossip." Her dignified fury, her profound disappointment. It was all there, written in the elegant script he had once admired and later cursed. There was no pleading, no denial, only the cold, hard statement of his failure. He had judged her. He, who prided himself on his logic and perception, had been played for a fool, not by her, but by the very gossip and malice he so disdained. The forged letter, her secret meeting, it was all part of a web, and he had walked right into it. The book fell from his lap, landing open on the floor. His eyes fell upon Galileo's drawings of the moon, a celestial body once thought to be a perfect sphere, revealed to be cratered and imperfect, its beauty residing in its rugged truth. Shame washed over him, hot and sharp. He had behaved no better than Isabel Finch. He had let his pride and his fear of being deceived override everything he knew to be true about Sophia's character. "Miles," he said, his voice raw. "Find me the best private investigator in London. I don't care what it costs. I want to know everything about Lady Isabel Finch's activities for the past month. I want to know who she's met with, who she's paid, every whisper, every secret. And I want to know the identity of the young man Miss Vance met at Hatchard's bookshop." His despair transformed into a cold, focused rage. He would not just clear Sophia's name, he would obliterate the lies that had been used to harm her. For the next few days, Alistair barely slept. His investigator, a shrewd man named Mr. Davies, worked quickly and efficiently. The threads of Isabel's plot began to unravel with astonishing speed. The street boy who had delivered the anonymous note was found, and, when faced with the Duke's authority, confessed he'd been paid 2 shillings by a woman in a veiled hat who matched Lady Beatrice's description. The forger was tracked down in a seedy print shop, and under pressure, he admitted to being commissioned by an agent of Lady Isabel to copy Miss Vance's handwriting. The bribed former maid was located and confessed everything she had told Isabel about Sophia's secret. The final piece of the puzzle was the artist, Thomas Galloway. He was easily found, and he spoke openly of his cousin Sophia's kindness and secret generosity, expressing his deep dismay that her charity had been twisted into something so ugly. He showed Mr. Davies the letters she had written him over the years, full of familial love and encouragement. The truth, as Sophia had written, was indeed a quiet thing, and now it was screaming in Alistair's ears. The full scope of Isabel's malicious, calculated deception was laid bare. He felt a wave of self-loathing so intense it almost buckled him. He had caused the woman he loved unimaginable pain because he had been too proud and too quick to believe a lie. An apology would not be enough. Words were insufficient. He needed to make a statement so grand, so public, that no one would ever dare to question Sophia's honor again. And he knew just the place to do it. The annual Blackwood Masquerade Ball, the pinnacle of the social season, was in 2 days. It was an event the entire ton attended, a place of masks and secrets. This year, it would be a place of revelations. He would use the very stage of society that had condemned her to orchestrate her complete and total vindication. He sent a special invitation to the Vance family, who were preparing to depart for the country, with a personal, handwritten plea to Sophia on the back. "Please, grant me one last chance to prove I am the man you thought I was." The night of the Blackwood Masquerade Ball was a riot of colour, music, and intrigue. Behind masks of velvet, silk, and feathers, the elite of London society felt free to indulge in gossip and speculation. The primary topic of the evening was, of course, the dramatic fallout between the Duke and his freckled country mouse. Lady Isabel Finch, dressed as a regal snow queen in glittering white and diamonds, held court near the fountain, accepting the fawning compliments of her circle. Her victory felt complete. Sophia Vance was ruined and would soon be gone from London entirely. A hush fell over the crowd when the Vance family was announced. Mrs. Vance looked terrified, Mr. Vance looked resolute, and Clara looked defiant. But all eyes were on Sophia. She had not come as a wilting flower or a tragic heroine. Her costume was that of Artemis, the goddess of the hunt and the moon. Her gown was simple, elegant silver, and her hair was woven with small silver stars. She wore a small silver mask that covered only her eyes, leaving the sprinkle of freckles on her nose and cheeks defiantly on display. She did not shrink from the stares. She met them, her chin held high, her back straight. She had not come for Alistair. She had come for herself, to walk through the fire one last time and emerge on her own terms. Alistair watched her from the balcony overlooking the ballroom, his heart aching. She was magnificent. He wore the simple black mask and domino of a Venetian gentleman, but he knew she would recognize him. He descended the staircase, his eyes never leaving her. As he approached, the crowd parted, sensing a confrontation. Isabel watched, her heart pounding with a mixture of fury and triumph. Let him see her. Let him see the disgraced woman he nearly tied himself to. Sophia tensed as Alistair stopped before her. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice full of a regret so profound it was almost tangible. "Thank you for coming." "I didn't come for you, Your Grace," she said, her voice cool and steady. "I came to show this city and myself that I am not broken by lies." "I know," he said softly, "and I have come to ensure the truth is finally heard." Before she could react, he turned to face the assembled crowd and raised his hand. The orchestra, on his signal, fell silent. Every masked face in the grand ballroom turned towards them. "My lords, ladies and gentlemen," Alistair began, his voice ringing with ducal authority. "I thank you for attending my ball. For the past few weeks, you have all been entertained by a cruel and vicious story concerning the character of Miss Sophia Vance." A collective gasp went through the room. Isabel's smile froze on her face. "I stand before you tonight to tell you that this story was not just gossip. It was a calculated, malicious lie, designed to ruin an innocent woman. And I, to my eternal shame, was foolish enough to believe it." He proceeded, with cold, methodical precision, to lay out the entire plot. He spoke of the paid street boy, the anonymous notes, the bribed maid, and the forged letter. He produced a sworn, signed confession from the forger, which his solicitor, standing nearby, presented for any to see. Finally, he introduced Thomas Galloway, Sophia's cousin, who stood nervously but proudly near the entrance. "This is Mr. Thomas Galloway," Alistair announced, "a brilliant artist and Miss Vance's cousin. Her secret meetings were acts of charity and familial love to help him pursue his dream, an act of kindness that was twisted into a weapon against her." He then turned his gaze, now like chips of ice, directly onto the Snow Queen. This entire fabrication was orchestrated by one person, motivated by a jealousy so corrosive it sought to destroy another's happiness. Lady Isabel Finch. Isabel let out a choked cry as hundreds of eyes swiveled to her. Her mask could not hide the blood draining from her face. Her friends, Beatrice and Cressida, took several steps away from her as if she were diseased. "You have no proof!" she shrieked, her voice shrill. "I have every proof," Alistair countered, his voice dangerously low. "The forger's confession, the maid's testimony, bank records of your withdrawals. Shall I continue, or have you disgraced your family's name enough for one evening?" Her father, the Earl of Danbury, pushed through the crowd, his face purple with rage. He grabbed his daughter's arm and, without a word, dragged her from the ballroom, her social ruin absolute and complete. In the stunning silence that followed, Alistair turned back to Sophia. In front of the entire ton, he removed his mask and went down on one knee. He looked up at her, his soul bared in his eyes. "Sophia Vance, I failed you. I broke your trust, and I caused you unimaginable pain. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn it. I fell in love with your intelligence, your kindness, and your strength. I fell in love with the woman who hides her compassion from a world that doesn't deserve it." He gently took her hand. "The world was wrong about you, and I was a fool for listening to it instead of my own heart. Your freckles are not flaws. They are stars, and I would be the luckiest man in the world if you would allow me to navigate my life by them." He looked at her, his hope and his heart in his eyes. "Sophia, Will you marry me?" Tears she had refused to shed in her despair now fell freely in her moment of vindication. But they were tears of joy. In his grand gesture, he had not just restored her honor. He had humbled himself, admitting his own flaws before the world. He had seen the truth, and he had made sure everyone else did too. A slow smile spread across her face, a genuine, radiant smile that made every star on her face seem to shine. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Alistair, I will." Sophia's journey teaches us that the things society might label as flaws are often the very constellations that make us unique and beautiful. She was mocked for her freckles, but it was those very imperfections that first caught the eye of a man who looked deeper than the surface. Her story is a powerful reminder that true worth lies not in conforming to shallow expectations, but in embracing our own inner strength and character. She faced public humiliation and the devastating betrayal of the man she loved, yet she found her resolve not in his approval, but within herself. In the end, it was her unwavering dignity that brought him back, not as a savior, but as a partner who had learned to see the truth. Her triumph wasn't just in winning the Duke's hand, but in claiming her own happiness and self-worth. Thank you for listening to this story. If Sophia's journey from overlooked wallflower to triumphant Duchess resonated with you, please show your support. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder of their own worth. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of justice, love, and the underdog's ultimate victory. Your support helps us continue to bring these tales to life. Until next time, remember to look for the stars.